if someone is in the field of making atomic energy, right? If someone is in the field of in the science of, is a scientist doing atomic research, unless he has the ethics to use that for the greater good of the humanity, of the earth, of the planet, he will destroy it. So you need to have certain ethics for sciences to perform. So philosophy becomes the bedrock of practical application of sciences. Our Shastras have philosophical underpinning that is called darshanas. So darshanas and Shastras, so Darshanika is the one who is engaged in darshana, and Shastragna is the one who is engaged in the Shastras, right? The practical application of sciences. So we know we have lots of sciences, but it has been covered up under the garb of faith or belief. Bhautika Shastra, that is the natural science, the branch of natural science that involves study of the physical. Bhautika means physical, right? Adhyatmika and Bhautika. So Bhautika Shastra, Rasayana Shastra, chemistry, Jiva Shastra, biology, Vastu Shastra, architecture, Shilpa Shastra, sculpture, Ardha Shastra. Shilpa Shastra is also architecture, apart from sculpture. So Vastu and Shilpa go together. Ardha Shastra, economics and politics. Niti Shastra, ethics and policy. Nyaya Shastra, logic and related subjects. Natya Shastra, dance and theatre. Moksha Shastra, liberation, self-realization, and so on. Alankara Shastra, aesthetics of language. Dharma Shastra, law. These branches of human inquiry, they form the foundation of Indian natural sciences, the practical application of our inquiry into the nature of the world. Shastra etymologically means that which uses shastra. Shastra is weapon, right? Shastra is weapon. It also means any tool. The tool could be an external tool or an internal tool. External tools like instruments to obtain knowledge. Internal tools like our own antahkarana, using cognition, memory, intellect, buddhi, manas.
Namaste to all the viewers that have joined us today. Today we are embarking on another episode of Indic Talks organized by the Center for Indic Studies. Science and Shastra differ in approach and context. Science relies on empirical evidence and quantification, while Shastra encompasses the broader scope. Dr. Rajiv Kurapati, a US-based physician and philosopher who obtained medical training in Chennai, Kentucky, Arizona, and he holds an MBA, a master's in Sanskrit, and has also authored award-winning books blending medicine, philosophy, and spirituality, explains how Shastra blends reason with metaphysical insight, offering a holistic understanding beyond purely empirical observation. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, as we discuss how science is not a Shastra. I welcome you, sir, and I request you to take over from here.
Thank you, Ojeshwiji. I'm very happy to be back on your platform and to be interacting with your audience on this Center for Indic Studies platform. Today's topic is Shastra is not equal to science. So now India is, as we know, India is going through what we call a civilizational awakening, right? So for the last 10 years, we have seen what we call an India story, like the growth story of India. We have seen that for many decades. We have been a sleeping nation. We have pretty much copied what the West had shown us. When we look at what is special about India, all that comes to mind is festivals, temples, food, and so on. So we don't talk about sciences. We don't talk about something innovative that's coming out of India. Only in the last 10 years, So if we want to be Vishwaguru, if we want to show the world, if we want to be the top of the world, not just economically, but in many different ways, art, tradition, and so on, we have to equip ourselves. The way we do that is to see what is special about our culture. Apart from modernity, we have to blend tradition with it, correct? So let us see what Shastras offer to us. So this is only maybe a less than an hour talk. So I will not be able to explain everything in this, but I'll give you a flavor of why science and Shastra differ, and yet they have certain similarities, right? So when I said we copied most of it, what I meant was we just took what the West told us and simply believed it, and and they just copied it. When we made it our own, be it science, be it technology, and so on. So when the Rigveda mantra says ano bhadraha kratavoyantu vishwataha, what it means, let noble thoughts come from all directions, it does not mean that we stop thinking. When thoughts come from all directions, it also means that we think and take thoughts from all directions. So that is the meaning of it. So remember that science is based on philosophy. Philosophy encompasses many things like ethics, ontology, epistemology, metaphysics, and so on, right? So just like philosophy is the bedrock of sciences, I'll give you an example why philosophy becomes very important in sciences. If someone is in the field of making atomic energy, right? If someone is in the field of making, in the science of, is a scientist doing atomic research, unless he has the ethics to use that for the greater good of the humanity, of the earth, of the planet, he will destroy it. So you need to have certain ethics for sciences to perform. So philosophy becomes the bedrock of practical application of sciences. Just like that, our Shastras have philosophical underpinning that is called darshanas. So darshanas and Shastras, so darshanika is the one who is engaged in darshana, and shastragna is the one who is engaged in the Shastras, right? The practical application of sciences. So we know we have lots of sciences, but it has been covered up under the garb of faith or belief. Let me give you some examples of what Shastras we have. Bhautika Shastra, that is the natural science, the branch of natural science that involves study of the physical. Bhautika means physical, right? Adhyatmika and Bhautika. So Bhautika Shastra, Rasayana Shastra, chemistry, Jiva Shastra, biology, Vastu Shastra, architecture, Shilpa Shastra, sculpture, Ardha Shastra. Shilpa Shastra is also architecture, apart from sculpture. So Vastu and Shilpa go together. Ardha Shastra, economics and politics. Niti Shastra, ethics and policy. Nyaya Shastra, logic and related subjects. Natya Shastra, dance and theater. Moksha Shastra, liberation, self-realization, and so on. Alankara Shastra, aesthetics of language. Dharma Shastra, law. These branches of human inquiry, they form the foundation of Indian natural sciences, the practical application of our inquiry into the nature of the world. So you see all these Shastras, but we were never taught about this in schools or colleges, right? So unless you actually take up these courses voluntarily, most of these most of us are actually hearing for the very first time, except Moksha Shastra, because Vedanta has become so popular. Moksha Shastra has become very famous these days, and we think that is all India has to offer. No, we have all these Shastras. So Shastra, the word I'll come to the differences between a brief, a succinct overview, or the differences between scientific method and Shastra method. But let me explain what Shastra is. Shastra etymologically means that which uses Shastra. Shastra is weapon, right? Shastra is weapon. It also means any tool. The tool could be an external tool or an internal tool. External tools like instruments to obtain knowledge. Internal tools like our own antahkarna, using cognition, memory, intellect, buddhi, manas, and so on. And most of the time we mistakenly equate Shastras to either scriptures or sciences, and the sciences, that too very impoverished version of the sciences. So this the next few minutes I'm going to explain you the brief an overview of what Shastra entails or encompasses. Now coming to science, very briefly, when someone asks us what is science or what is scientific method, it starts with what we call a hypothesis. Hypothesis is an intelligent guess. What is for example, uh, if I say brushing teeth, our teeth, brushing teeth twice a day is good for our teeth and gums. That is an intelligent guess. Instead of once, you brush it twice a day, that is good for your gums, right? Your teeth and gums. Now that is an intelligent guess. Now we have to prove or disprove it. Now we have to prove it. So how do you do that? You create an experiment, either with animals or humans. You create an experiment and you obtain data from that experiment, and that data you pass it through the grind of statistical analysis, and you obtain results of that, and those results you interpret. What does those numbers mean? So it is number crunching. You obtain data, go through statistical analysis, interpret the results, and disperse that knowledge through journals and so on. This is the foundation, the fundamentals of scientific method. Similarly, Shastras or the Indian schools of thought, or the Bharat or the um, Hindu school of thought, have specific methods to test their hypothesis. It is not that they did not have hypothesis. I'll come to the differences, I'll come to their strengths and also weakness. It's important. We should not delude ourselves by saying everything Indian is great or perfect. No, it is not. There are strengths and weaknesses. Just like scientific method has its own strengths and weaknesses, Shastric method also has its own strengths and weaknesses. So when you look at scientific method, it has two distinguishing characters. The first is when we frame a hypothesis and conduct an experiment, you have to create a controlled, what we call controlled environment to conduct that experiment, such as in laboratories or outside in the population, based on the concept of what is in Latin called ceteris paribus, which means with other things being the same. In other words, you create a controlled environment where all the variables, for example, all the variables remain the same or constant. So you make them constant so that you're only studying 2 or 3 variables. In our example, I stated, you look at our hypothesis. Brushing teeth twice a day is good for gums. Now you have to select a population to test this hypothesis. How do you select the population? You make everything else constant so that the population is as similar as possible, as identical as possible. For example, you select a population with similar age group, for example, 20 to 30 years of age. So age became a constant. So age will not is now not part of that variable. The only variable is health of the gums and brushing teeth twice a day. And so you made age as a constant, 10 to 20 years of age. Gender, male or female, you select one or both and say that you have selected in your study. The second is you state that people who does not chew tobacco or pan or whatever, right? So that affects the health of the gums. You also make constant that people who do not um, um, do not eat too much sugar, because sugar damages the gum. So like this, you take as many variables as possible and try to make it constant. And you all, so that you can only focus on health of the gums and brushing teeth twice a day, because all the other variables come into play. age, as you age, a 70-year-old gum is not same as a 20-year-old gum, right? You cannot conduct an experiment of with having 20-year-old person and a 70-year-old person. So you say, I'm making that age constant. So that is the concept behind ceteris paribus. But what happens when you do this experiment and you release the result? You say that brushing teeth twice a day is good for your gums, and you apply it to the entire population, and you say that it is good. No, it is not, because it only works in that experimental condition, in that lab condition, when you control everything else. We forget that. That is one of the weaknesses of experimental method. The strength is you get data from it. So, and you can run through it. In other words, you can quantify the information that you get rather than quality, you focus on the quantity. So it is possible. By this, you can study the cause and effect of two variables, brushing teeth, or, for example, taking a pill, taking one tablet, and its effect on high blood pressure, right? So those two, you can study the cause and effect of it. So by keeping everything constant. And the second characteristic of modern medicine is quantification, objectivity. So the subject is not important in scientific method, because numbers is the most important part. Quantification, use of statistics, use of mathematics to arrive at conclusions. So there is no, if I say this physician is great because he has intuitive capacity, modern science does not agree with it. It says that, modern science says that whoever has this quantifiable knowledge will be able to produce the same type. It does not, in fact, we used to say, or we still say, but it will eventually go away, the experience of a surgeon matters in doing surgeries. But eventually what happens, when robotics come over, the experience does not matter, because robotics is doing the surgery and the human is only supervising it. So even then, during surgery, the experience, the subject, the one who is doing it, will become less and less important. So objectivity becomes important. But this is lacking in Shastras. I'll explain more as we go along. Now, let us focus purely on the Shastras for the next few minutes. I divided this talk in 5 categories, where Shastra uses reason in it. Most of the time, we think that it is faith and belief in Indian sciences, right? Or Indian knowledge systems. No, there is a lot of reason that goes into it. And then there is a specific framework and structure that goes into it. I'll give you just a flavor of what reason is. This is from a darshana called Nyaya Darshana. So this can be applied in many type of studies that can be done in the framework of Shastras. So there are 5 components, or Pancha Avayava. Pancha Avayava means limbs, 5 components to it. Pratigna, which roughly translates to hypothesis. What is the question? What is the question that the inquiry is trying to address? Then hetu, or reasoning. Hetu in other contexts means cause. Here it means reason. How do we know? That is, in what way can we get information, or how do we test this hypothesis? The methods used to reason out the topic under the consideration. That is hetu. Udaharana. Udaharana means usually example, right? But in this context, it means supporting that reason with appropriate examples or precedents. So either you go back in history and get precedents, or you use other examples. This Udaharana is trying to answer, how can you conclude that? How do you know that, right? How can you conclude that? Using examples or using evidence. We'll get to what evidence means in the next few slides. So what is the evidence that you use to test your hypothesis? And then Upanaya. Upanaya means application. What is the further establishing the relation between the stated example and the subject matter? So in other words, when you take the pramana, when you test the hypothesis, at the same time, you are also talking about the application of it. See, it's not simply enough to say, I have done this study or research. It's very important to say what is its practical application. That is another thing. And then finally, nigamana. Nigamana is conclusion. What is, how do you link all these two and make it applicable, or make it useful to whatever study you have done. So there is reasoning in Shastra. And this reasoning is applied not just in practical sciences. It can be applied in many different ways, in many different ways from this Shastras. The process is applied in subjects ranging from the most mundane aspects to the most abstract inquiries, such as, does Ishvara exist, or is there an Atman at all? So things like that, as abstract as philosophical or as abstract as those. This reason in Shastras or Darshana is also applied in many aspects of everyday life, whether to convince oneself. For example, a lawyer argues in a court. She is using what is called parardhanumana. So there is a concept called parardhanumana or swardhanumana. Swardhanumana means to convince oneself. You have to convince oneself using reason. And parardhanumana is to convince others. So when a lawyer argues a case in the court, she is using parardhanumana to convince others. But when studying the case for herself, she is using her or him. He or she is using swardhanumana. Okay. So that reason is important in Shastras. So now coming to, when we look at Shastras, it is important to understand that there are certain remember, Shastra, it is not just there for everybody to go in, right? So you need to have a certain qualification. You need to know what you are getting into to have a serious study of Shastras. So there is a thing called Anubandha Chatushtaya. Anubandha Chatushtaya. Chatushtayam means four, right? Chatushtayam, Anubandha, a combination or a group of four connections. Chatushtayam means four, a group of four. Anubandha, connections, a group of four connections. So what are they? Adhikari. What the person who wants to engage in a Shastra study should be eligible. He cannot be someone that has just interest. He should have enough qualifications. He should have just like if I want to get into medical school, just like how I did almost 30 years ago, want to get into, I must be eligible to get into the medical school, whatever means that is, right? In my during my time, it was even now it was an exam that you have to qualify. You have to have a certain rank to get into medical college. So you have to have the eligibility for it. Let's go one by one. So adhikari. It emphasizes we are talking about the adhikari lakshana or adhikari eligibility or criteria to ensure that the learner possesses necessary qualities and readiness to engage with the subject matter effectively. The concept of adhikari here, it goes beyond mere academic capability. It encompasses students' moral disposition. Because remember, if somebody wants to engage in the science of atomic study, he or she has to have certain ethics to use that knowledge only for the greater good of the humanity and not for destruction. So what is the student's moral disposition? Earnestness, sincerity of purpose. All this becomes important. So all this comes under adhikari lakshana. This ensures that the teachings received by those who are truly prepared to appreciate and internalize them and use it properly. Now, next comes Vishaya, or the subject matter. This aspect identifies the core content of the subject matter. So what is the Vishaya of the text or the Shastra or Darshana being studied? This Vishaya outlines the themes, the concept, the inquiries addressed within the work to provide a clear understanding. Recognizing the Vishaya helps students and scholars to align their expectations and approach the study with a focused intent. That becomes an import. So, of course, we all need to know the subject matter, but before you enter into it, you need to know, you need to have eligibility, you need to understand what you are getting into. That is the Vishaya. Next thing is Prayojana. What is the Prayojana? What is the use? It defines the objective or the purpose behind studying the Shastra. It answers the fundamental question of why one should engage with the study. What is gained from this endeavor? Understanding the prayojana of a shastra guides the learner towards the desired outcome of the study. So prayojana becomes important. The next comes sambandha. Now this links all the above three, the ones I mentioned. It refers to the relationship between the adhikari, who is the eligible student, the vishaya or the subject matter, and the purpose of the study. What is the prayojana of the study? So it links all these three. It elucidates how these three elements are interlinked and how they can collectively contribute to a wholesome understanding of the subject matter. It is so that is the importance of Anubandha Chatushtaya. Before you engage in either a text or a darshana or a shastra, Anubandha Chatushtaya covers the essential questions of who, what, why, and how. So you see how the framework of a shastra is well laid out, and it is not simply faith or belief. Now, coming to the unique format of the knowledge transmission. Now, if somebody says, I have, somebody just throws out a statement and says this is an important thing, it does not become a pramana. It does not become a pramana in Shastra. Just by doing what we call kapola kalpana. Kapola kalpana means, kapola means cheeks. Kapola means cheek. Kapola ha. Kapola means cheeks. So something that just mouthing is not, it's not part of Shastra. It has to come from buddhi. So unless you use a lot of study and then write a Shastra, that becomes a pramana for others to follow. So in that context, there is this knowledge transmission has a unique format. Understanding this, in the next few slides, I'm going to explain how this unique format of understanding of knowledge transmission is very unique to the Indian knowledge systems or the Shastras. It starts with, you have seen in many Shastras, Yoga Shastra, Dharma Shastra, or Vedanta Shastra, whatever you have what are called sutras. Sutra simply means thread. But what kind of thread? So I'm going to explain what a sutra is in the next few slides. It's very interesting. There is definitions for this. We simply think, just say yoga chitta vritti nirodha is a yoga sutra starts with yoga chitta vritti nirodha. It is not simply a statement. It is not a statement that just came out by Kapola Kalpana. It came out with a lot of buddhi behind it. So sutra definition is alpaksharam asandigdham saravat vishwatomukam astobham anavadhyancha sutram sutra vido viduhu. This is a definition of the sutra. So most of us does not even know that there is a definition. We were not even told that there is such a thing exists. So what is alpaksharam? Brevity. Brevity is very important, especially if you look at grammar, English grammar, Paninian grammar of Sanskrit, brevity becomes very important. So there is a statement wittily saying, Ardhamatra laghavena putrotsavam manyante vayyakaranaha. The linguists, if they were able to cut down half matra, half of the word, brevity, half of the letter, ardhamatra laghavena, they are able to bring down their statement by half a letter. Putrotsavam manyante vayyakaranaha. So Putrotsavam, they are as happy, as joyous, rejoiced, as if they had a child. They had just a child is born to them. So Abdhamatra Laghavena Putrotsavam Manyante Vayyakaranaha. So brevity becomes very important. And then Asandigdham, clarity and lack of ambiguity. So you need to have clarity in what the Shastra, what the Sutra is saying. And then Saravat, it has essence rich content. The content should not be redundant, it should be essence rich. And then Vishwatomukam, it should have universal relevance or applicability within that context. I'm not saying it is universally applied everywhere, but within that context it should have universal relevance or applicability. And Astobam, then reliability should be reliable, and Anavadyam should be flawless. It should have all these qualities, and only then it becomes a sutra. So now, sutras are pithy statements that lack a verb, sometimes even a subject. Can you name a sentence, a meaningful sentence, without a verb? Literally impossible, right? So sutras are such statements that go beyond the definition of the statements. They lack a verb. For example, eco energy, ad gunaha, akaha savarne dirgaha. These are all sutras. These are all Paninian Ashtadhyayi and Panini's Ashtadhyayi. It's coming here. They can only be, these are sutras. The best examples of the sutra is composed by Panini, Sanskrit scholar par excellence, who developed an extensive body of 4,000 sutras that are close to perfection as per scholars. Scholars are still doing PhDs on just one or two sutras of Panini. So he has developed these sutras, and these sutras fall into the definition, under the definition of what Alpaksharam, Asandigdham, Saravat, Vishwatomukam, and so on. So they are just very short, pithy statements that sometimes lack a verb. But for us to understand them, you need to unlock the what the sutra is saying, and that can only be understood with the help of commentaries. Those sutra. So the primary goal of reducing enormous amount of knowledge into short aphorisms is twofold. One is to keep so that you can study so much in a short sutra, in a short format, and also you can memorize it and pass to successive generation just by oral recitation. I know scholars who have memorized all 4,000 sutras of Panini and passed on to the successive generation. In this generation, in this 21st century, I know people, Sanskrit scholars, who have memorized all 4,000 sutras of Panini. So this sutra format is customary. You see this all over, all Shastras, Yoga Sutra, Nyaya Sutra, Brahma Sutra, Bhakti Sutra, even Kama Sutras. So Kama Sutra has a lot of sutras in it. So it is a very unique way, very Indian way, very Bharatiya way of Shastra. Because it is not easy to understand what these sutras are saying, we need aids. We need what is called bhashya. So bhashyas are detailed commentaries on these sutras. Sometimes, most of the time, it is word-to-word meaning and running explanation along with the views of the commentator. The commentator is called bhashyakara. So what is a bhashya? That bhashya has a definition. Sutrarthe varnyate yatra vakyaihi sutranusaribihi swapadani cha varnyante bhashyam bhashya vido viduhu, which means the meaning of a sutra is described in the words that follow the sutra. So the words that follow the sutra in the bhashya, and even those words are also explained within the bhashya. So bhashyas are a bit detailed. So it is this commentary is called bhashya, and bhashya clarifies its own terminology. Bhashyakaras use terminology, and they explain what they actually mean by their. So bhashya becomes a very elaborate explanation of the sutras. The most famous bhashyas are those written for Right now we have them. We probably lost a lot of bhashyas for many shastras, but the ones that currently that is very popular is bhashyas on Brahma Sutra in the area of spirituality, and in the areas of grammar we have Mahabhashya by Patanjali on the Sanskrit grammar of Panini. Panini belongs to almost 2000 to 2500 years ago, somewhere in Kashmir or the area north of Kashmir. So Kashmir was a bedrock of a lot of shastras and knowledge systems. The next important bhashya is by one called Shabaraswamy. It's on darshana called Mimamsa Darshana. So, and there is another interesting thing. There can be many bhashyas on a single sutra sometimes. So, for example, Brahma Sutras, there are 16, definitely more than 16, but the one I have seen is 16 bhashyas written by various commentators or bhashyakaras who are also acharyas. They are Adi Shankaracharya, Ramanujacharya, Madhvacharya, Vallabhacharya, Nimbarkaracharya, and so on. They have written the bhashyas on Brahma Sutras. So the next, so we have seen Sutra, we have seen bhashya. Next comes Vritti. Vrittis are smaller commentaries. It is also another form of explaining the sutras, but in a slightly less elaborate way than the bhashya. Sometimes the author of the vritti is the same as the one who composed the sutra or his student. These are simpler and more straightforward commentaries than bhashya. The most popular vrittikaras. Vrittikara means the one like bhashyakara. The one who composed vrittis is vrittikara, is Bodhayana. He composed commentaries on Brahma Sutras. Another example of this vritti is Kayata's vritti on Patanjali Mahabhashya. And the next in line we have seen so far Sutra, Bhashya, Vritti, and now comes Vartika. Vartika, while Vritti provides a basic explanation of the text of the sutra, Vartika delves even deeper, offering more detailed analysis. And Vartika has a definition. Vartika Gnana in which the discussions are held about what is stated in the sutra, what is not stated or implied in the sutra, sometimes what is misunderstood or misstated in the or misunderstood. I told you misstated is not by definition part of the sutra, but misunderstood maybe. So it is a lot of Vartikas very crucial. They are critical and analytical texts that dwell into these areas, that provide clarification, additional information, missing information, and sometimes correction or correcting the misinformation or misunderstood information. The best example of Vartika is Katyayana Vartika of Panini Sutras of grammar and Sureshwara of Adi Shankaracharya's Upanishad Bhashya. In the traditional study of Sanskrit text, Vrittis and Vartikas add different layers of commentary to the sutra. Now, the final one we have seen so far, Sutra, Bhashya, Vartika, Vritti, Tika. Right? Tika is it is like writing your own notes. We write notes, right? When we read text for our own understanding, we write our own notes. Tika is like sub-commentary that explains and interprets a bhashya, vritti, vartika, and so on. So the Tika dwells into various viewpoints, clarifying things for us. Notable Tika is the Shankara Bhashya Tika, also known as Bhamati, written by Vachaspati Mishra. So what Vachaspati Mishra did is he wrote detailed notes and made it available to others. It's called Bhamati. So, and so we have seen so far Bhashya, Vritti, Vartika, tika, and the final thing is the tippani. Tippani is the footnotes in a manuscript. For example, it is equivalent to it. It is not exactly that. It offers additional information, brief explanation, references, without going into extensive discussions on the bhashyas. So this sutra format is very unique to Indian Shastra. So let us not miss this. Let us not just ignore this, because this is very unique. And it is very, it's also adds some color to things. It's very poetic. So that is about the sutra format. Now, when it comes to how do we obtain valid knowledge, let me explain in how modern scientific method gets its knowledge from. Where do they get information? So in the order of preference, there is in the order of preference from the most to the least, there is a thing called systematic reviews. It is a summary of outcomes of various intervention trials to obtain what we call the bottom line of what is true and what is not. So people have done different studies throughout the world. Systematic reviews gathers all that and and gives us ultimately what is, you can have so many studies done on the same subject, and ultimately what is true, what is not, systematic reviews provides us. This is modern scientific method. I'll come to Shastric method in a little bit. Now, next in line of importance of the hierarchy of knowledge or information in modern scientific method is randomized control trials. So we see these randomized control trials mostly in medicine, but of course you see that in economics, finance, and other things also. Research that typically compares a proposed new intervention against a control, whatever intervention that is. You can use in economics, finance, you can use in science, technology, medicine, what have you. And then next in line, which means we are going less importance from the most important, systematic review. Second comes randomized control trials. The next comes observational studies. This type is basically purely observing events and then concluding based on certain analysis. Of course, quantification is there all along. And then ultimately subject opinion, expert opinion. Expert opinions is the least important in modern scientific method, because remember I said subjectivity is not so important, objectivity is important. Expert opinion, if I say based on my experience this is true, it is less important rather than show me the evidence, show me the numbers. That is more important in modern scientific method. In Shastras, we have what is called pramanas. This is how we obtain. Pramana means a tool, the way you obtain knowledge, a tool to obtain knowledge. Now, there are numerous pramanas. Number one is perception. Knowledge obtained directly. Pratyaksha pramana. Pratyaksha means the one right before you, through direct perception, you obtain knowledge. I'll give you examples in a little bit. Second is anumana. Through inference, you obtain knowledge. Third is upamana. Upamana through comparison. We'll get to the examples in just a little bit. Next comes shabda pramana. So on. There are a few more. So examples here. Pratyaksha, seeing the tree with your eyes, or hearing the bell ring, or smelling. So you hear that, you get the knowledge directly by pratyaksha pramana, direct sensory experience in seeing a tree, hearing the bell. Anumana, the classic example that the Shastras give is, or especially Nyaya Shastra gives, is seeing smoke on a hill and inferring there is a fire. So you see on a hill there is smoke coming, and you immediately say, you don't see the you just see the smoke, and you immediately infer that there must be fire on the mountain, and that is why there is smoke. That is inference. And now the third one is upamana, or comparison, or using analogy. You go to a forest and you see some animal, and you start comparing that with another animal that you saw before. And in this example that I gave, there is a wild ox in the in the forest, and you already know about the characteristics of a cow. So you say this looks like a cow, so it must be belonging to the family of a cow, and it is probably a wild ox. So gavaya is like a cow. So using comparison, see, I'm simplifying it, but you can take it to any complicated extent in the Shastra and use these. And then there is Ardhapati. Ardhapati is presupposition, presumption, or presumption. So, what it means is there is a person who has gained a lot of weight. Um, of course, we are not talking medical here. Within this example, within this narrow context, I'm not saying the person has gained weight because he has retained a lot of fluid or he has a thyroid problem, so he's not that. The person gained weight even though he's not eating during daytime. So how did he gain weight? The presumption is, the truth is, he's eating at nights. That is why he has gained weight. So you don't, even though that statement says he's not eating during the daytime, then we tend to think that nighttime is for sleeping, so he's not eating. No, he's actually eating at night. He's sleeping during the day. That is why he's gaining weight. So that is an example of Ardhapatti. And Anupalabdhi is very interesting. Anupalabdhi means non-perception in English, very crudely translated, non-perception, meaning not seeing a pot in a particular space and concluding that there is no pot here. The absence of perception leads to the non-existence in that location. Now, this may sound simple, maybe even bordering ridiculous, because when you say there is no pot there, what is so great about it? But it can be applied in Shastras, in scientific reasoning, to make your point. So they use this example called Anupalabdhi in that. And then comes what is called Shabda, or verbal testimony. Verbal testimony, some people say verbal testimony and Agama are same, and some people say they are different. Verbal testimony or Shabda means, or Apta Pramana. Sometimes they say Apta Pramana or Agama Pramana, they are nothing but the same. So Apta Pramana or Shabda Pramana means from a trusted source, from an experienced teacher. Based on his experience, you get knowledge. So that is also part of this Shastras, Pramanas. And then Agama, scriptural testimony, Vedas, Bhagavad Gita, or whatever scripture it is. So Agamas usually means Vedas. So that is also a strong Pramana for the Shastras. So you see how how Shastra uses numerous Pramana to study a subject matter under consideration. Now comes Vada. Vada, we simply translate that as argument, right? When people are engaged in Vada and Prativada, we simply think they are arguing. No, that in this Shastric context, it means debate, dialogue, dialecticals. So arguments, counter arguments, accepting, rejecting conclusions, and so on. There are three types of debates, and the first one is, of course, the three types are Vada, Jalpa, and Vitanda. First one is called Vada. Vada is a very technical term in this context, in the study of Shastras. It means a type of debate where two sides participate in a healthy argument with mutual respect. The goal is to further the knowledge and arrive at truth. Either two students, two researchers, or student and a teacher, they are engaged in a dialogue, questioning and answering. Their goal, both are open in their perspective and thesis to discuss the subject matter with an open mind, to reason out, to resolve conflict, to arrive at the debate. The both sides either proves or disproves their theses, but only based on proper evidence and reasoning. The outcome of Vada is to increase the depth of knowledge, explore new ideas, reconcile differences, so that you arrive at a meaningful conclusion that can be applicable, useful to practical application, right? So that is Vada. Now, Jalpa. The main aim of Jalpa in a debate is to win over the opponent by whatever means necessary. So why is this important? This is important because when you engage in a debate, you need to know what type of debate you are engaging in. Are you engaging in Vada, where you want to advance the knowledge, you want to have outcomes that are useful to both the Vada and Prativada, Siddhanti and Pratipaksha, or you engaged in Jalpa. Jalpa means it is a debate aimed at winning our opponent by whatever means. The goal is not to further knowledge or arrive at the truth, but to slay the opponent using clever debating tactics. The debate is usually noisy and quarrelsome, where one side tries to impose their theses on the other by discrediting, misleading, misinterpreting the opponent's thesis. The debater sometimes employs clever tactics such as chal. In Hindi, there's a word called chal. Comes from the Sanskrit word chala, to misinterpret, to twist the meaning of the opponent's thesis, or to use inappropriate rebuttals. It is called jati. These are all technical words. Using jati. If they say the person is using chala and jati, it means he's engaged in jalpa. The challenger tries to outwit the opponent by disqualifying, by circumventing his position. So this kind of debate goes in the wrong direction. So if you want to advance your science, engage in Vada type of debating. So the third type is called Vitanda. Vitanda, there's some people, at least in Telugu, we say Vitanda Vada. I'm sure in Hindi and other languages, they use that. But actually, Vitanda is different from Vada. Vitanda, here the debater does not even have a position. Okay, but still disagrees with the opponent's thesis. There is a hostile argument. It is a hostile argument that does not allow the opponent to establish their thesis. It is worse than Jalpa because the debating party does not even have a thesis. He just want to shoot the other opponent during the or in the debate. The goal is to simply silence the opponent. This debate is destructive. So if we want to engage in Shastra, only engage in Vada and not Jalpa or Vitanda. So you see how after using pramanas, after going through reasoning, through a certain framework, and having a certain type of debate using Vada, you arrive at conclusions. And the significance of Vada is very significant because for example, in Nyaya, there is a lot of Vada and Prativada going on. And through using this kind of structure, Ayurveda, Jyotishya, Ardhashastra, Ganita Shastra, so many Shastra, all those Shastras use Vada to advance their knowledge. Even Vada appears in Mahabharata, Kautilya's Ardhashastra, and so on. So you can see that. Now, let me briefly mention how there is one area that is highly significant. The difference is significant between science and Shastra. Science is highly quantitative. It uses numbers. Number crunching becomes very important. Objectivity becomes very important. I mentioned this to you earlier on. But when it comes to Shastras, you don't see number crunching here. It is qualitative analysis of the subject matter. So, during the course of evolution of human inquiry, we have become more and more objective. We have shed quality and focused more on the quantitative assessment of things. In other words, it became more black and white. Why? Because we want to replicate our studies. If we make it very quantitative, if we control our experiments in laboratory conditions, it becomes very easy to replicate those studies, to validate those studies by repeating that experiment. Right? So that is why we had to take that concession in Western or in the modern scientific method. However, unless we appreciate the quality of things, we appreciate the subjectivity also, it becomes very dull. So it is important to embrace modernity and also embrace tradition. So as we embark into this India success story, moving forward into the next few decades, if we want to become an example to the to other nations, we have to retain our tradition, and also we have to excel at modernity. By modernity, I don't mean wokeism and other things. By modernity, I mean pure scientific method and tradition. So you have to, in fact, India is the only country that has the potential to retain both and get the best of the both worlds. You see many Eastern nations like China, Korea, Japan, and they have lost their ingenuity. They have, you look at China, everybody is westernized, everybody, they lost their the spark of their tradition, right? India is the only country that retained its language, its tradition, its dress code, and so on. And we are seeing a resurgence of that civilizational awakening. So while we are going through that civilizational awakening, it's also important that we revisit what we have lost in the name of um, westernization or modernity, and see the strengths and weaknesses of it, and see if we can apply any of these principles in our day-to-day life. So with that, I'm going to conclude my short talk on why science and Shastra are important, why it's important to embrace Shastra, know a little bit. You might say that I'm busy with more in my, you might say I don't have time. I'm busy with going to college and doing my job and science and technology, or whatever endeavor that you are in, profession you are in. You still, believe me, you still have time. I'm a medical doctor. I went through medical school. I have done post graduation, I've done fellowship, I've done an MBA, and then during the course of it, here and there, I picked up time. I stole time here and there. I tried to study. I did a master's in MA in Sanskrit, and through that, I was able to appreciate the beauty of our Shastras. And I actually apply some of these principles in medicine with my patient, and they really appreciate it. I live in America. I practice that, and they really appreciate it. So that is where I conclude this. Ojeshwiji, I think we can conclude this here.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much for this talk. It's been very insightful. And one day maybe we can have a talk on how your journey has been as a medical doctor into MA in Sanskrit, which is of much interest to me. Thank you very much, sir. We hope to have many such talks with you. Namaste.
Definitely. Thank you so much.